2 minutes after. We really like to be punctual and on time. Welcome to our ACAP delegates as well as our visitors and the public to the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board March 17th meeting. Our meetings are monthly, the third Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 12 noon here at the City of Atlanta's City Hall in Committee Room 1. I do have some brief announcements before we get started in housekeeping that I always seem to forget to say, and that is there's no food or drink in the committee room. If you need to do so, then you can do it outside outside of the committee room. Also, for all of the delegates who need to sign in, we have gone back to what we believe is the best logistics for our meetings, and that is that all delegates sign up outside at the table. You'll see your sign that says delegates and alternates sign in. There's a sign-in sheet for you and all the materials for the meeting. And then also for our visitors, there's a sign-in sheet out there as well as materials for you as well. If you want to view our meetings via Facebook, we are Facebook Living very, very shortly. We may have already started. We also have added a new component to our meetings, and that is that we're now videotaping our meetings. Even though we do appear on cable channel 26, we appreciate that service that the City of Atlanta gives to us. But we also want to add that a component of videotaping, particularly because we have started our YouTube channel and we want to be able to expand our reach. And we believe by adding that component, we'll be able to expand the great work that the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board does for the citizens of Atlanta. At this time, if someone would give me a copy of an agenda. We have a copy of the agenda. Thank you very much. Yeah, out on the table, all the materials are out on the table. We want to continue to also thank the City of Atlanta's Planning Department for the support that they give us. Trust me, we don't take that for granted. And we appreciate all, like I said, the work, the support that they give us throughout the month and then on Saturday mornings at our general meetings. I've officially called the meeting to order. And once again, I want to thank all of you all for coming on this beautiful, somewhat cloudy, rainy, warm day in the City of Atlanta. We are getting ready to take roll call. We do know that we need 13 to have a quorum in order to vote on any matters related to the work that we do. Thank you. So this time I want to ask Ms. Barbara Hubbard, our recording secretary, to go ahead and do roll call. The delegate sheet should be outside. If it's right there, Mr. Carr, could you do me a favor? That's okay. Ms. Bush, Mr. Jones, someone. Thank you very much. If you could take that outside. There's a table there that already has the sign-up sheet. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Hubbard, go ahead.
NPU A, no representation. NPU B, Richard Brown, delegate. John Muzzy, alternate.
Here.
C, no representative. Jack Goldberg, no delegate. Alternate is Jack Goldberg. NPUD, Jim Martin, delegate. Michelle Moore, alternate. NPUE, Jim Snyder, delegate. Ryan Harris, alternate.
Jim Schneider, present.
NPU F, Debbie Skopczynski, delegate.
Present.
NPU G, Ola Reynolds, delegate. Keith Sharp, alternate. NPU H, Barbara Hubbard, present. Charles Shelton, alternate. NPU I, Jennifer Freeman.
Present.
Eunice Glover, alternate. NPU J, Al Bartel, delegate.
Present.
Benjamin Dickerson, alternate. NPU K, Chad Smith, delegate. Lita Hardeman, alternate. NPU L, Bob Jones, delegate. Maurice White. NPU M, Michelle Schreiner, delegate. Rashad Muhammad, alternate. Did she say did I hear present for Michelle?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. NPU N, Amy Stout, delegate. Catherine Woodling, alternate. NPU O, Carl Holt, delegate. Marcus Owens, alternate. NPU P, Rashid Hunter.
Present.
Hope Hoffman, alternate. NPU Q, David Getachew Smith, delegate. Eric Toomer, alternate.
Present.
NPU R, Alfred White, delegate. Harold Hardnett, alternate. NPU S, Chris Brown, delegate. Nick Hess, alternate.
Yes.
Okay. NPU T, Terry Ross, delegate. Donovan. Alternate. NPU V, Columbus Ward, delegate. Stephanie Flowers, alternate. NPU W, Jack Brunner, delegate. Steve Carr, alternate. NPU X, Michael Hopkins, delegate. Robert Burney, alternate. NPU Y, Dana Scott, delegate. Chris McCord, alternate. NPU Z, Ann Phillips, delegate. Sharita Durrett, alternate. Okay, that concludes the reading of the delegates.
Thank you, Ms. Hubbard. If you can go ahead and count for us. Thank you. Okay.
Point of order,
She's an alternate.
point of order,
Hold on one moment, Mr. Schneider.
because I counted 13.
Hold on one moment, sir. Okay, we have 13 voting delegates, so we do have a quorum. Very good. Okay, we can go
Madam
ahead.
President,
Yes, Mr. Snyder?
Jim Schneider, NPUE. Based on our experience at the last APAP meeting, I would like to present a motion that we add to our rules a provision that unless an MPU chair has communicated with the APAP president or with planning prior to the start of any APAP, any regularly called APAP meeting, that no representative be recognized as a voting representative for that MPU.
Okay, Mr. Snyder, if you recall in February, we actually, I believe we brought up the exact same thing, and it was duly noted. I know you want to make a motion.
The motion's on the floor, unless it's second, of course, it'll die, but
I understand, okay? So it's been properly seconded. Any discussion? My discussion is that we've already dealt with the exact same motion. I'm not sure if it even was a motion, you introduced it as a motion, but that has been complied and is moving forward. We've already, all of the MPU's chairs who have changed their delegates have either notified me via, I spoke with them either at a meeting, or they sent an email, or phone call.
Okay, what I'm trying to do is something that goes further than this year, that it becomes part of our rules, and that anyone coming in should get a copy of our rules along with our bylaws.
Okay.
And you can always suspend rules, but you cannot suspend bylaws. So you suspend rules if there is some extraordinary condition, but generally, the rule would be that they can't come in and change it without having prior disclosure to it, and that's the reason for my motion.
I understand. Okay, any more discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor of Mr. Snyder's resolution, which basically, not resolution, but motion, is to make it a rule, a part of APAB's rules, that a MPU chair has to notify us in writing and or
Other, it could be telephonic,
Okay,
email,
telephonic.
whatever. They have to contact either planning or you, or your position.
Okay, and we will make that a rule of ours, so a rule mean in writing, that if a delegate has been changed, that they would notify us. Okay, all in favor, by show of hands? $14. All not in favor? Okay, 2. Any abstentions? Raise abstention, your hands for those who abstain. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4. Okay, Mr. Martin, what was your vote?
I was opposed. If you had rushed through the comment section, I was going to comment, and I believe the bylaws already takes care of that by requiring that timely notice be given, and gives you the discretion to determine what timely notice is.
Okay, I did ask you for any more comments, so.
Yeah, sorry, I arrived late, so I'll just get sorted out.
I get it. Okay, thank you. All right, so that motion passes, and we will put that in our to Mr. Martin's point, if our bylaws already address it, then, but we will take that up at our retreat, March 31st.
Point of order.
Mr. Timmer?
I believe that would be in conflict with the bylaws, thus it is not a proper motion if it is in conflict with the bylaws. And I would ask the parliamentarian to advise us on that.
Yeah, I'm checking on that now. I don't believe it is a conflict with the bylaws, because the bylaws merely state timely notice, and I believe what Jim Schneider is trying to do is define that beyond the mere statement of it.
Mr. Schneider?
Jim Schneider, the other point would be that if it's a rule rather than bylaw, if there are extraordinary circumstances, then the body can suspend the rules. If you define that in the bylaws, you cannot do that. And so timely manner strikes me as a nice general rule, but that's hard and fast in that sense, and so the interpretation gives us some flexibility on a day-to-day basis.
Do the bylaws define or require us to have rules? Does it set out that we should have rules or that we shall have rules?
Well, I know that we are in the process of drafting, actually, it's pretty much done, meeting rules that will not necessarily be voted on, but have come through the executive committee meeting and will be recited in the beginning of each meeting. So I don't know if that's something that can be added into the meeting rules, or are we talking about something different?
I follow up on that with Mr. Toomer, that I don't know that anywhere in Robert's rules or our bylaws that it says you can or you cannot have rules. And rules, seem to me, are perfectly appropriate if there are things that you might want to suspend from time to time, whereas bylaws you can't. So I would see a perfect reason for having them, and I would never see a reason that it would be prohibited from having rules. And to my knowledge, it's not in Robert's rules one way or the other.
Okay, the motion carries, and we will take up other details in our next executive committee meeting, which will be in April. But I will make a note to add it on to our retreat agenda as well. Everyone should have a copy of the February 17th meeting minutes, if you could look through it. Then at the top, you will see that it says unformatted. And unformatted basically means it's not in its regular format. Like we kind of divide it by headers and that type of thing. And so, but I think the most important thing right now is to make sure we don't have any changes to those minutes. And if so, we'll go ahead and make those and let's vote on these to be approved. Mr. Toomer?
Motion to accept. Second.
Okay, we've got a motion to accept and also a second motion as well. Any comments, questions, additions? Okay. All in favor of approving February 17th meeting minutes of the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, please show by raise of hands. Okay. 16 in favor, all not in favor, show by raise of hands. 1, any abstentions? Mr. Snyder and Mr. Martin, 2. Okay then,
We have one, the third, I don't know, their voting member,
who is that?
the little voice.
Oh, I know, I was like, I heard somebody else around, it's a little baby back there. Okay, that motion carries, okay, so our meeting minutes from February have been passed. Okay, well, I should have said this before we approved the agenda, but that's okay because I did not put that it was going to be a voting item, so that's good. The resolution that you see before you, hopefully, what's important is that all delegates have a hard copy of the resolution. If you don't, all the materials are on the table outside. This is a resolution that we spoke about in February's meeting that is called the APAB/NPU Grant Program Budget Resolution. It's for an increase in the budget, in the funding. And so what you see outside, what you have is a draft of the resolution. You then see 2 comments from Jim Martin and myself, because what we did is we asked the executive committee to look over the draft resolution and give us yes, sir.
Madam Chair, we did not approve the agenda yet. First motion we did was a vote.
I'm so sorry. I did this in February too. I want to do the minutes and the agenda at the same time. My apologies. Okay. So before we approve the agenda, if you all can make the change, just go ahead and put on the side of resolution, just put FYI. You won't be be voting on this at this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Today's agenda show by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Today's agenda has been approved. All right, so back to resolutions, FYI. What you see before you is a draft. Everybody have a copy, particularly the delegates. That's very important that every delegate and alternate have a copy of the drafted resolution that Ann Phillips, our finance secretary, who's also the finance chair, as well as Terry Ross, who is the chair of the Committee on Council. They have been working diligently on this resolution. We do believe it is very important that we really look through this and give delegates as much, I won't say as much time as they need. Give them a deadline to give us some input. And so what you will see is comments based on the resolution that Mr. Martin and myself have made. And then you also will see a drafted budget that's associated.
Jennifer? There are also two drafts of resolutions out of committee that are for information only on the table there,
Out of which
on the
committee?
shelf, on the shelf there. One out of CHR, one out of zoning.
Okay,
They're just for informational purposes, but there was no room out there on the front table when I arrived late, so I'm trying to do it. So I just put them up there if anyone wants a copy.
okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Martin. Ms. Phillips, would you go get copies for us, please?
You have copies.
You have copies
I
here?
can pass it out too.
Oh, okay, thank you, Mr. Martin.
You're welcome.
At this time, I'm going to give the floor to Ms. Phillips and Mr. Ross. Excuse me, Mr. Snyder?
Yes, before we leave the issue of the resolution, is there, I'm not quite understanding the process. You introduced the resolution. Is it going to a committee of APAB? Is it been tabled until the next meeting? What, you've introduced something, you haven't done anything with it. So in one sense, it's not, you can't just sort of leave it. Something has to happen for an interim, whether it needs to go to a committee of APAB or what, or it needs to be placed on the table, something.
Actually, Jim, that pertains to a rule, oddly enough. We have a rule now that resolutions need to go to the executive committee. And so the next place it would go would be the executive committee, and when it is timely and appropriate, we've always tried to bring things to the full body as well for informational purposes.
Just saying, and I appreciate your comment, but it should have been stated, is my point.
Okay, Mr. Snyder, that's one of the reasons why, if you noticed, I asked that we change on the agenda to it being FYI. Okay, this item was actually introduced initially last month. And so what the committee did, those two committees, they have now put it in the proper format of a resolution.
Okay, then I've got a problem with why this wasn't sent out to the membership, because we are in the beginning now of the budget cycle for the city of Atlanta, and we want to get this in. If it's as important as you and I think it should be, putting off for another 30 days doesn't serve our purposes. And so I would almost request that we discuss it now and find out if the body wants to vote it up or down.
Mr.
That would be
Snyder,
my
okay.
suggestion,
Hold
but
on,
that's
hold on,
that's
Mr.
only one person.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. It will go to the body after this meeting. It will be sent to you.
It should have been sent in anticipation of this meeting, like last week.
The purpose
So we
is to
could have
discuss
looked at
it.
it.
The purpose is to discuss it today. We're discussing it today. That's why it's FYI. That's why I changed it on the agenda. Yep. Terry, go ahead.
What we did was we drafted a budget in which we basically tripled the annual budget for an APAB MPU. We felt that this was important and necessary as the APAB MPU system is a community engagement arm or extension of the city of Atlanta. Based upon voter turnout, based upon levels of participation at the MPU and APAB, there needs to be improvements that can easily be facilitated with additional monies. So that's why we came up with this proposed budget here and has drafted the resolution. Thank you very much, Ann. And the number that we came up with is $300,400 per year, of which $25,400 would be appropriated to APAB, this body here, and an additional $275,000 would be distributed to the 25 MPUs in equal amounts of approximately $11,096 per MPU.
That's it, Mr. Fox?
That's it.
Okay, Mr. Tiller?
Yes.
Just making sure.
I would propose two fundamental changes, and that is number one, that the attachment be stated as attachment A and incorporated in the document as attachment A. And therefore, we would have a legal reference to one and the other. At this point, we really don't. So this needs to be attachment A, and then it needs to be stated in the resolution as attachment A.
I would agree with that.
Mr. Tiller, are you still thinking?
I saw something else, but I can't think of it.
It's not
Okay,
a
I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, if you would look at very carefully, since we're in discussion, look at the comments. It's a lot to read right now, but if you want to scan it, if you would look for number look at number 1 of my comments, and look at number number 2 of Mr. Martin's comments. And basically, what I'm saying is that we need to, instead of itemizing it for marketing materials such as T-shirts, those types of things, that we look at opportunities for advertising on billboards. The Atlanta Citizens Review Board, Mr. Reed is here, and I don't know if you all have seen throughout the city, when you sit on the benches to wait for the bus, they have advertising there. Also on MARTA buses as well. Look for, ask for funding for those types of tools for communications and expanding our reach. And so that's what that piece is. And so I spoke with Ms. Phillips about it, and so we can incorporate that as changing some wording is what we need to do. Even radio announcements, the Atlanta Citizens Review Board, they also have radio announcements as well. So that's something for us to think about. As far as the flags that you see in the neighborhood, identifying the different communities where you go, the pole flags, and even your flags for your yard, that could give a visibility to the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board and neighborhood planning units. Also, another addition that we wanted to add on has to do with, we have neighborhood associations that have reached out to me during the Neighborhood Matters Awards asking if they can participate. And so expanding an invitation to the neighborhood associations to be a part of the honorary process for the Neighborhood Matters Awards would be good. And then, other than that, this whole thing about parking passes and MARTA passes, because one thing about it is that people not only park, but they also ride MARTA. Case in point, Mr. Martin, although I think he cycles, I believe, most of the time to our meetings. But what we're thinking is that it may be, we can have two options, but it may be more doable for the city to do a stipend. Now, the Atlanta City Citizens Review Board, they did get theirs approved. They, and Mr. Reed can speak to this, they did ask for a stipend, and I believe it was approved. And that way, you could sign up for, the delegates could sign up to be a city vendor to receive a check. I don't know if that's the process by which, correct, Mr. Reed? And you could use the $25 a month for parking, or whatever you'd like to use it for. So that may be, I think, more streamlined as opposed to having to go directly to the parking vendor, because that's what we have to do, and then see what they could do about providing us passes or us paying for parking at a reduced rate. The same with MARTA, we have to go directly to MARTA as well. So we can keep both of the options in, but I do believe that the stipend may be more doable. Now, someone mentioned about, well, that defeats this being a volunteer organization. Yes, we are volunteers, but volunteers usually don't have to come out of their pocket monetarily for anything, regardless to whether it's $1 or $2. And so, when you all drove down, if you drove down here or if you took MARTA, you paid at least $4. So we kind of have to keep that in mind as well. Ms. Phillips?
As far as the parking line item is concerned, when you review the budget, if you agree that perhaps we should take the parking out and just go with the stipend, what we'll do is set the stipend based upon $20 a month per delegate and alternate. But if we take the parking out, then we'll increase the stipend to $25 per delegate and alternate per month. So as you review this and we get your vote on this, please let us know what your thinking is about those two line items.
You have a comment over here?
Mr. Schneider?
And again, Jim Schneider, MPUD. A couple things on the resolution itself. Instead of going to city council, because that normally goes to the clerk, and we've talked about this before, that they don't do anything with it. So therefore, I would suggest that the resolution on the now therefore section, that it be submitted to the mayor and to each of the individual council members, and in particular, I believe, finance, which is where this would go, so that they might consider it differently than the normal process, and it gets filed. We're not changing the intent of it, but we're talking about what the execution, in my opinion, needs to be based on what we've learned in the past.
Okay, Mr. Schneider, thank you so much. Those of you that attended the planning leadership training, remember that Mr. Ross made this suggestion, and of course, planning gave us a little bit of direction as to how to go about doing this. The plan at this point is, once this package has been approved by APAB, we will give individually a copy to each council member. And we're asking each alternate and delegate to lobby your council member. Those of you that attended the training, remember that there are 3, what do you call them, at-large members, and then each of you has at least 2 council members in your district. Some of you have as many as 3 or 4. Lobby your council members. We'll make you as many copies of this as you need once we voted on it and approved it, but we need your help. this package is not going to be handled, quote unquote, business as usual. This is going to be a pavement kind of thing where you're going to see me and probably Terry together down here at City Hall lobbying our council members. Yes, Mr. Snyder, the mayor will get a copy. The chair of the finance committee will get a copy. And as again, we were instructed by the finance committee, what is
Theo Pettis,
yeah, what's his title?
Bill Pace.
he is the administrator, city council
Yeah.
administrator.
His direction to us was to make sure we bring it to him first.
Madam
So,
President, I was interrupted during my comments, so I will continue.
okay,
That doesn't change what our resolution should say, and so my comment still stands. The other point on the draft budget, I've got a problem with having two finite amounts in all these line items, that we should have, in my opinion, a greater generality of the area and not necessarily go specifically with like social media being 2450. That might be fine, but it seems like we're locking ourselves into a budget when we really want more flexibility, and we need the funds generally to do these things. And I'm not afraid to, not just a $300,400, we can break it down, but I don't want to have too strict a line item in it. Plus, I would suggest if we're going to do the stipends, the stipend almost needs to be on an attendance basis. To just spend, give people money and then they never show up.
Absolutely.
I've got a problem when we have MPUA, they don't even have anybody specified to come down and vote for them. If they're not gonna show up, I don't want them to be eligible for the money,
Sure,
and we need to have some way to deal with that.
sure. Well, the initial vision and objective of this proposed increase of the budget was to extend the reach of the NPUs and amplify the voice of the individual NPUs as well as APAD. And so I'm in agreement with you that we can just take one big bucket, call it marketing, and throw all those things in there, because, now we're talking billboards on the side of the road and bus stop, backstops and things
Radio
like that.
advertising.
And Mr. Ross, we
Yeah,
could,
radio,
we
yeah.
could
So,
enumerate all these kinds of things that are listed. I just don't want a light item on each one of them.
I fully agree with you, Jim, absolutely.
Okay.
So, we did this fully realizing that we may amplify some voices that we don't necessarily want to hear, or that we certainly don't agree with, but that's the way a democracy works, and so.
Terry, setting that
Yes.
up, and right in line with what Jim is suggesting, we could put those as an EG in the marketing column, just put EG.
Okay.
EG.
Sure.
Okay. Ms. Gorsinski, good to see you. How are you? I don't know about anybody else, but I miss you. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
I'm Debbie Skipczynski, I'm chair of NPUF. And I haven't been engaged in any of these conversations regarding this budget increase, but I do want to make a couple comments. First of all, has any thought been given to how this is going to be implemented? Not every NPU, and NPUF is right at the top of the list, has the capacity to take on these kinds of funds. We don't have a treasurer, we don't have a checking account. We have no way of taking care of it, and quite frankly, I'm not sure that I want that, because that puts us at risk in other ways for people when they care to sue, for example, the NPU. Right now, we have no assets, we like it that way. The second thing is that a lot of NPUs are neighborhood-centric, so these kinds of funds just don't make any sense to us. And our neighborhoods are blessed with the kind of resources to do these sorts of things on their own. We like being neighborhood-centric. We like the activity to be for us as well. And the third thing is, has there been any thought on how we're going to audit this process? Are we going to allow the NPUs to take on the money and spend it at will, or will there be an auditing process? Is there an ethical issue that could come out of this? And I think until we get those things straight in our minds, that we should hold off on making this kind of request for the NPUs. For APAP, certainly, they're doing a lot of good work, a lot of not so good work, but there is a need for additional funding in order to do the work that we're doing. I think that makes a lot of sense, but until the NPUs are on board and have figured out how they can, and whether or not they even want to accept these funds, including the stipends, I think we might need to set that part aside. Thank you.
Thank you. If you all look on the comments that Mr. Martin, and I think myself as well, I believe it was maybe Mr. Martin's number three addresses this, as well as number 3, as well, what Ms. Kopsinski said, and that duly noted, because I remember when the idea came up, I was concerned about it appearing as though we are trying to, I don't want to say dictate, but that we're actually getting in the affairs of the neighborhood planning units. And we do address it in our comments where that there are NPUs that don't have checking accounts. They take up donations and they use third-party organizations such as nonprofits to act as surrogates. So I agree, and I think that we're in discussion, and so I think that may be more doable to hone this back into the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board. But as far as how to implement it, as far as it will be audited and the ethical issues that may come along with it, we definitely need to ask those questions of our support mechanism, which is planning. They can help us with researching that, unless Ms. Phillips, perhaps you want to address those issues.
Being able to request the 4,000, essentially you'll be able to request whatever this amount is, 11,000. And you still will have to go through that grant process. Now, it might mean that we have to get with planning to add another line item in there, but right now it's that money goes for physical enhancements, education and training, and basically this is going to be the same thing. What Mr. Ross, I think, was proposing when he made the original proposal was that the $4,000 is just not enough for the NPUs to do the stuff that they need to do every year. So instead of your grant application being for $4,000, your total grant application will now be $11,000. And we'll probably ask them to go back to doing it in 2 rounds like they had done in the past. So no cash money comes to anybody. It will still be a part of your grant application.
Okay. If that's the case, then we could probably, which I'm so glad you reminded me of that. I knew that, I just didn't remember it. When you have the grant application, it has a different criteria. Make sure that criteria lines up with the description of this budget. That probably would be best.
If the stipend part of this is approved, then we'll have to ask planning to add the stipends as a line item in those categories. And we'll have to work out all the details with them. Essentially, instead of your grant money going to another vendor as it relates to stipends, it will go to the alternates and delegates. And we'll have to get all of them registered, of course, as city vendors in order to do that. But that's a simple process.
As well as to Mr. Snyder's point regarding it being attendance-based as well.
It is
Yes.
it is incentivized by participation and attendance.
Absolutely. Very good. Mr. Mr. Bernie, yes. How about those, you your first name? I was just trying to think of the second name. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I think I've heard mentioned several times radio advertisement. I'm not sure that should be a line item consideration because we should be able to accomplish radio advertisement as public service announcement, which would be at no cost to the body.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bernie. Ms. Brown,
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great, how you doing?
Good to see you.
So I want to speak to Chris Brown, NPUS. I want to speak to the parking situation. I think it's the spirit of the stipend, I think that some people are maybe against, but if we simply keep it simple, it's almost like the city employees. They pay $35 for parking passes, and I know that parking was an issue in terms of the quantity of parking passes that they allowed out. So it's a simple way to do it. Either we can accommodate the Saturday parking pass on a specialized matter, or we can make a line item for the EPUs for the delegates. So you could do a $35 increase per month, which will also encourage participation of city business to the EPUs. So therefore, the parking pass for all the EPUs, for the delegates at least. And so I don't know how far you want to extend it to the alternates in terms of the monetary piece of it, but it's just something to consider that if all the EPUs have a pass, especially for APAP, and possibly maybe if we want to further the conversation that the APAP representative or is just for the EPU itself. That's just a conversation that you have, but that'll be a simple piece. It's only $35 a month, and they actually can go through the city. We should have the vendors do that by being an extension of the city. So it's just like being a city employee. If we want to apply for a parking pass for availability on Saturday, there's no city employees here, so it shouldn't be a big issue. But if we work that out, they can probably take place in the fiscal budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Regarding parking, this is a conversation, several conversations last year, and Ms. Pines did some research for us, and we can definitely, John is here, Mr. Clinley is here, and can go back to see if that's doable. But I do know that she did do some research and came back with us to let us know that we would have to contact the company directly in order to do that, and that the city of Atlanta could not be a part of that process. That's my understanding, okay? But we can have, you want to, John, put it on your to-do list, or you want to clarify now, or you may know the answer right now.
Yeah, so city employees ourselves, we actually go through the vendor. We have OEAM, Office of Enterprise Asset Management, that handles that. It still takes that process, but we go through the vendor as well. And it varies, so one parking day is 35, the next parking day is like 60 numbers. So it varies on the parking day, but we still go through the vendors.
Right, so understanding that we already went through the vendor and we already have an established relationship for that, so you have to see you go through OEAM, which is the city department. So whether we went through OEAM or Department of Planning, they're still the representatives of the governing body that represents us. So it's kind of like the same process in my eyes, and how I see it. It's like you're going through the vendor, but you know what I mean, you're going through OEAM.
I think the difference is that the funds that the employees are paying are their funds and not city funds.
So that's why I said that you take the line item and you increase it into the NPU. So therefore, it's automatically drafted out for the year.
Okay.
And so you have the passes, so that means you never had to touch anything individual, you never had to touch anything, participation. You won't worry about who came, who didn't come, it's already allotted for that time. And the simple resolution could be just Saturday. But that's on the vendor, between the vendor and the city. But we just kind of say to keep it simple. No individual will have to touch any money. No individual has to talk about getting money and reimbursement or who didn't come. It just eliminates that whole conversation to say something simple that we just come down here and park on. Here's a parking pass for when you come down here, or you validate parking when you check in. You have validated parking. I think it's a simple piece.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Snyder?
Jim Snyder, MPUE again. One main observation, there are several boards and commissions, at least the boards, the zoning review board and the board of zoning adjustment get paid something like $75 a month. So there's certainly a precedent if in fact we are asking the city council and whatever to classify us in that same category. That's a possibility. Whether they do it is obviously up to them, but there is no problem with that, in my opinion, if they wanted to do so. Do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rao?
Actually, that was my point.
Okay.
And what I want to say again was, this stipend thing and this parking thing mixed into these other, I think, operational costs that NPUs to varying degrees might be shouldering. Some are more affluent than others. I think putting that in there kind of muddles the argument about increasing the grant or making more funds available on an optional basis for people for NPUs who might want to up their grant for these things. They do have to go through the process of asking for it. Some people just think it's not worth it. And I completely, support that, initiative on your part to go argue for that, and I would vote for that. The stipend thing, the parking thing, it's complicated because we're not the only board or the only, organization that has volunteers, and if what's to keep, everybody from asking for $20 a month so they can come down here and serve as a volunteer. I think that has to be sorted out. And if it has been sorted out in certain more distinguished situations than ours, that should be talked about too. But I would suggest we separate those things, just because I think it makes it clearer what's going on. And as for Debbie's comment, I don't think she understood that what you were doing, that every service, every expense, anything that comes out of this is basically going to be provided by a vendor and paid for by the city, and there will never be any money handled by the NPU. So, I think some clarity might be in order, and I do think that putting money in the hands of individuals for optional things they can do, like parking, and I think that's a problem. I think any legislator would have a problem with that.
Right, thank you. On the budget, we have it on the agenda where it says that this is grant program increase, but we can add it onto the top line. That would be good. And we have to move on. We need to go into our guest speaker session. Do we have one more comment, Mr. Rashid?
Thank you, Madam President. Just a few things. So just to be sure, so this is really just extending the amount of money available to the grant program, and these categories are just kind of suggestions. We're still operating under the guide rails that are currently out there with the current grant program.
That's correct.
All right.
Okay.
All right. I appreciate this. I appreciate what's trying to happen here. So don't take what I'm about to say as me not appreciating it. I just always want to sound caution when it comes to making NPUs too dependent on city funding, just because if APAB is doing the work that, or there's certain things that APAB can do that can put us at odds with the city council, and therefore there could be the possibility of political reprisal if we become too connected operationally to these funds. It's just a possibility, and I think that focusing on increasing human capital around fundraising at the NPU level so that we can get our own money is something that there's some value in pushing. Thank you.
I think that's wonderful, Mr. Muhammad, and I'm going to probably ask you to add that up. I totally believe in fundraising. I'm a professional fundraiser, and I agree with you 100%. You can help us develop that program.
May I respond to that?
Yes, Mr. Ross.
One of the things that we came up with is that one of the reasons that the NPUs are underfunded and have been underfunded for so very long is so that the elected officials would not be held accountable, because it, of course, decreases our capacity to hold those individuals accountable. And so with that in mind, that's one of the things we were thinking is the need to increase the budget, amplify our voices, and bring the collective together, working together. And so, of course, the elected officials are going to feel it, and there's going to be some back and forth in terms of political retaliation and that kind of things. But we see that now, and we don't have them dying, so. Fair enough.
Okay, this time we're going to move along in our agenda. I want to make it, wait a moment. Okay, all delegates, if you could, we'll put this in a minute, I'll send an email as a reminder
in 7 days, we need to get as much input regarding the resolution. So 7 days from now, let's just say, by Friday the 23rd. There was a conversation about us having a special call meeting in order to take the vote, and that would be via conference call. After the meeting, the discussion right now, I'm feeling a little hesitant, thank you, about doing that. So, if you all can give us your input by the 27th, and then we'll we'll make the changes. So, I'm sorry, the 23rd, Friday, March 23rd. We'll make all the changes, compile all the input, and then send a revised resolution. I like the idea that Mr. Rao mentioned about taking the stipend out, making it, Mr. Rao, are you recommending that we make it as a separate resolution?
Sure, why not?
Okay, so there'll be 2 resolutions. One that will be increased funding for the APAT MPU grant program, and then one for recommendations for a stipend.
Question.
Okay? Mr.
Yes, if we're going to basically make the resolution, basically tripling the amount that the city puts into it, do we really need to have a budget, which gets back to my issue of having line item dollar amounts? If we're talking about just tripling the budget with basically the same guidelines they've had, I don't see what the problem with that is. We're not really talking about a material change to what the 100,000 or the 300,000 would be spent for. We're certainly not changing the process, and if we're eliminating the stipends and parking issues at this point, then we're just really asking for a tripling of the budget because of inflation and because of need. And that makes it a whole lot simpler issue and doesn't get us into other, we can talk about the parking and whatever and stipends separately, and we've simplified the one issue. Just simply, are they going to find us $200,000 more?
Right, so when you apply for a grant, you have a budget. All the MPUs do, who submit, as well as APAT, we have a budget. And so if it is approved, this is just kind of like an example to the council more than anything, and what we're proposing. So once they approve whatever the amount is, then when we go to submit our grants, then we'll know really they would have approved that amount, and then it would line up.
Well, let's go back to when the mayor put the $100,000 in. I don't know that he had a budget. I think he had the general areas that you could expend the money in, and I think what we're really asking for is just tripling that money for the same kinds of things,
Right.
but not delineating a line item, and that's what I'm trying to get away from.
Right.
You don't want to get caught in that trap.
Right, which is why, Mr. Snyder, I mentioned that the line items are going to change to actually mirror the whatever it's officially called, the grant program application.
Yeah, but I would suggest you say tripling the amount based on the same guidelines as have been done for the 100,000 in previous years. That's the way I would, that would be simpler.
If I may.
Okay, yes, Mr. Tillman.
If I may. Jim, please consider that the grant process now is very specific, as we know, and that potentially that some of the items that are listed here are not listed in the current grant program. So these items, if they incorporate, can be dropped, but if there isn't anything that specifically is set out in the current grant program, then they need to be incorporated in so that the monies can be legally used for that purpose. And so I'm partially agreeing with you, but also saying that we need to make sure that we're not stepping outside the grant, the current grant, and if the grant needs to be modified, then we can modify it.
Well, if we're eliminating stipends and parking,
We're not eliminating it, we're just taking it out.
well, we're
taking out of
eliminating from this
resolution.
resolution. We may put them on another resolution, that's fine. But we're eliminating from here, and then somebody needs to say, are the remaining uses listed here compatible with what's already being spent? I don't know that, yes, I don't know that, no.
That's why it's listed, because we need to incorporate it. We're stating it so that it can be incorporated,
Okay.
and that's something.
Right.
But that's why I didn't want to have a line item for a dollar amount. We can put in, for example, and I think you said it earlier, i.e. the kinds of things we would like to see, included in the budget. And there may be something that's not there now, I don't know.
Right.
And that's why
Gentlemen, we're gonna have our APAB retreat on the 31st, and these are some items that we can talk about. We
Well,
do need to
timing though
move on
becomes
the.
very important if we're talking about getting into the budget cycle, which is, I believe, has already started. And so,
It has not started yet, is that correct, Ms. Phillips?
I believe the first part of March, that's what I was told.
I haven't seen any documentation. Okay. 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 All right. So once again, you have 7 days. Any comments that you didn't make in this meeting, you can do it via email, or you can call Ms. Phillips or Mr. Ross with those comments, because we need to move on along the agenda. We do have special guests who've been waiting for a presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'll just be very brief with this. I know you have to conduct other business. Again, my name is Jebu Sengover, and I'm the City Ethics Officer. I've been with the office over 9 years now. We are a small city department. We do currently have 5 full-time folks, and we, as we say, we do the best we can in terms of our work for the city. Just for a few things I just wanted to bring to your attention today. The first thing, of course, as we were talking about, Ms. Freeman said, the financial disclosure requirements. And I'm sure many of you know that you are required to file the financial disclosure statement, and you are required to file that in the year in which you are at your position and the year after you leave the city. And that's the question we get from people. Why do I have to file this statement if I'm no longer in this position, serving in this position? City code does require you to do that just for the year after you leave. Another reason people ask is, why do I have to file this statement? What's the purpose of it? This is not an uncommon requirement. This is common in many other jurisdictions as well as the federal government, and it's really required for transparency. So we do review any business, contractual, or financial transactions that a city board member or a city employee may have. And really the underlying purpose is to make sure that folks do not have any potential conflicts of interest. And by conflicts of interest, any outside business interests or personal interests that may interfere how they serve as a city employee or serve as a city official or board member. Now, the information is required if you have any outside income over $5,000, real estate interests, any business transactions with the city, or if you have any family members that have transactions with the city. We do not require any personal sensitive information. We do not ask for any of that, like driver's license or social security. We do not ask for any of that information. And so even though we do have a public interfacing where the public can go on there, for example, I want to know what I filed in my statement, for example, the public cannot see personal information, identifying information like address or phone number, and it's very important that we tell people that. Again, as Ms. Freeman indicated, the filing period is going on now. The deadline is April 2nd. We do have a few people outside. Unfortunately, they won't be here much longer, but if you need any assistance, they will be out there. And you should have received notices for those of you who are required to file. Another thing I want to point out that as of this past year, 2017, going into 2018, we are now actually auditing disclosure statements. We did not have the staff or resource to do that in the past. So we're actually going back and looking to see what people are putting on the statements. Are they putting accurate information? Is this requiring further research? So we are actively, since we do have, I have a staff person that's been tasked with that. Because again, one of the questions people ask is why you're doing that. So there is a method to all of that. All right, a few other things I just wanted to point out in terms of our code. A lot of people don't understand, and in the interest of time, this is not a full ethics session, just a few pointers. Our code primarily covers conflicts of interest, whether people can accept certain gifts and gratuities, as well as preventing misuse of city property. We do not cover, I tell folks, we do not cover specific or govern processes or procedures. For example, your board, we do not have jurisdiction of that. So for example, if we get a complaint about processes and procedures, that is not under the Board of Ethics jurisdiction. The Board of Ethics only has jurisdiction over any issues related under the Code of Ethics. Now, again, we also say that we make sure that there may be times where if there is an ethical question raised, we may have to do further research. So there's not always like a black line, a clear answer, because we do have to look at interpretation of the code and what may or may not apply. So really, our code provides minimum guidelines, but we have so many opinions on our website. A lot of people are not even aware of our website. We have the website, and it's atlantaethics.org. And there's so much information of all our operations and any information you need. And one other thing that we did do today is we did bring some ethical guidelines for city board members, so you're welcome to grab a copy. The last few things I want to just mention, and that's in terms of thinking about when is recusal required for you in terms of your role. When are you required to recuse on a voter decision? Primarily, again, if there is a conflict. If there's a conflict of interest, if you know that there's some financial or personal interest, financial meaning you're getting some kind of monetary or material benefit from the issue before the body. Personal could be where you're not necessarily getting an interest, but you know that this is a family relationship and you may not be as objective in terms of making a decision. Now, we do not say that you can still appear before a body as a citizen and a taxpayer, or if you're just representing your interests, you're representing your property's interests, you can appear before the body in that situation. So primarily that's all. I just wanted to bring up a few things about our code and the financial disclosure requirement, and if you have any, I'll take if there are any questions, I'll take a few minutes for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Yes, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, I emailed ethics officer at atlantaga.gov midweek this week. Does that go to you?
We have it's the ethics officer mailbox, so we're yeah.
Okay, I didn't get a response to it. I believe my vice chair has to also file a financial disclosure, but I wasn't sure about that, and she indicated that she didn't get an email with login information stuff on it.
Okay.
So if she does, I wanted to make sure that she got it, and since I didn't get a response to my email, I didn't know if I needed to take some other action on that.
What's your name again, sir?
Jim Martin, Chairman.
Okay. Hopefully I didn't go into our spam, because we do check emails constantly, so we do make sure we're as responsive as possible, but I'll double check into that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. There seems to be some more, maybe some comments for you, Ms. Singover.
Ken Howard, Public Engagement Advocate, my new title. I would like to have an update, have APAP updated about the request that the Committee on Council made of the Ethics Board in regards to the I'm going to say strength or comparative, I'm going to say worth of this ethics code in comparison to ethics codes elsewhere. And I don't think any of us know that they have been given that task, so maybe this will be edifying.
I believe what Mr. Howard is referring to is we've been asked to do an ethics task study. Just given the current time and we're all aware of it, the task study is to focus on city vendors, entities or businesses, vendors, contractors who may be doing business with the city, and what can be done to strengthen our code in regards to the relationships with these entities. So that's the research he's referring to. It's not due yet, we're still working on it, and it won't be ready for the next couple of months.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter.
Our question was, who has to file disclosure? Whether that, I know I haven't received these, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Okay, all right, I'm going to, I was going to bring this up later on, but the clerk's office is supposed to contact you directly if you are a new delegate or you are an officer in a different role. Okay, and what they're going to do is they're going to, normally what happens is in January we have an installation of officers and they come and give you your oath of office. But because we had our awards, they were not able to do that. So what they've decided to do is to call you directly, and perhaps you can take your oath of office either at a council meeting or in their offices. You don't have to come here. So I will follow up with them because a delegate list should have been already sent to them via the planning or some other organization. But I will double check with their office to make sure they have all the, they have updated delegates, and I'll highlight which ones need to be, that I think need to take their oath of office. Okay? And financial disclosures. Okay. Yes, I believe they do need to file, so. Yes, chairs, delegates, alternates, vice chairs, and even MPU chairs, APAP officers. Not the officers, but just officers, but that's just the chair and the vice chair of the MPUs. So if you are a new chair or vice chair, you should be receiving a statement from the ethics office. We probably need to coordinate that, Ms. Nkoba, with John, as well as myself, and make sure that no one is missed. Okay, all right. There is a fine if you don't file on time, and the alternates need to know that they have to file as well. Okay, all right. Mr. Toomer?
Quite quick, could Ms. Senkover actually address that in that way? We're not taking it from tertiary, we're getting it direct from the ethics office.
In terms of, excuse me, the fines, yes, I'm so sorry I meant to mention that. So, in terms of the process, the filing deadline is April 2nd. There is a grace period which ends on April 16th. After the grace period, we do start based on the code, fines will be assessed in the amount of $50 every 2 weeks. It does cap out at $250 if you're a late filer. Now, if you're in non-compliance, which means you do not file at all, that fine is $500, and you could even be subject to recommendation removal from your city role, city position. So we do take it seriously. So we do expect people to be compliant and file if you are required to file. And if you're a new person and you do not know whether you're required to file, you need to check with our office, because sometimes we're not even aware that somebody's been appointed to a role.
Just for clarification, could you specifically state how you get the role of people that need to file, where it comes from, give us the lineage of that process?
Okay.
And also, if a person was not notified, are they still subject to that same filing process?
So, in terms of, and I've been in the office for 9 years, and it's been a work in progress. So basically, the code specifically identifies folks that are required to file it. You have city employees, then you have persons that sit on the city board would be required to file it, as well as persons appointed by the mayor and city council to another board. So it may not be a city board, but if that person is appointed by the mayor or city council, that person is also required to file. And so we have identified, it's in the code, identifying persons that are required to file. Now, in terms of city boards, we get legislation, for example, our office works with the municipal clerk's office every year. We check to see if a board has been, a new board has been set up, and then we get the names of that board, and that's how we compile our list. Then we also depend on information we receive from our liaisons. We work individually with all the boards, commissions, and we check to see who's now on that board, if names have changed. So it is a very lengthy and can be sometimes, I say, a frustrating process, because people may roll off the board and we're not aware of that. And we by no means want to send notices out to people who are no longer required to file. So that's why we depend on the boards and departments, agencies, to let us know if the person is no longer serving, as well as whether we get new people. And we do also add, we do have a cutoff period, but we do continue to add during the filing season. So that's not unusual, we can do that.
Ms. Ngova? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
I also asked to get clarification on the person, if you did not notify them that they were to file, if they were still held accountable.
Okay, I apologize. So in terms of, we are required to notice and send notice to an individual. And if they did not receive notice, no, they would not be subject to sanctions if they did not, because they have to actually receive official notice by law. And we do have, it's set in the code, a paper notice in the law.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you a question. I believe this was a date. It was a 2018 delegate list. It was like this.
Okay.
And it was submitted to Ms. Hines. She had
Ms. Hines, okay.
Erica Hines,
right.
She requested it because she needed to forward it to your office.
Okay.
So the question I have is, let's make sure you have, because this has all the new delegates.
Okay.
And alternates on it.
Okay.
And so that these people on your list to receive.
No problem. And I'll make sure I check, because we have Janet Keene is she's a designated staff person, Janet Keene, in our office, and she works very closely with Ms. Hines, which is why I have her here today. We can double check that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Toomer.
And would you suggest that people that are present and have questions as to whether or not they received, that they should go to the table and register?
Absolutely. If they have any questions, we can tell them instantly right out there whether they should be required to file or not. We can check. And if they're not, we need to just maybe we have to do some further research and we'll contact them again.
If they were not on your initial mailing and they go to the table, would that be considered notification and they would be subject to fine at that point?
Oh, no, not at all. We still have to, what we would do is we still have to get them set up in the system. We still have to send them notice. No, they would not be, because they had no notice. You have to actually have notice.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Mr. Carr?
I rarely get to exert my leadership abilities, so I want to be first in line to give you this.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. That's commendable. Okay. At this time, we're going to call Mr. Reed up. He is Executive Director for the Atlanta Citizens Review Board, and maybe a few of the concerns that we had, or discussion that we had during that resolution, maybe you can help us, or lead us and guide us. Thank you.
Lee Reed, Samuel Lee Reed, the second Executive Director of the Atlanta Citizens Review Board. I came today to specifically talk about our mediation program, but just to give an overview of what the Atlanta Citizens Review Board does. For those who might not know, We investigate, educate, mediate, investigate, mediate citizen complaints against Atlanta police and corrections officers. We also do community education involving awareness building and know your rights trainings. We have 8 staff. We have reported 13 individuals. Actually, we have a couple of board members who are here today. Ms. Barbara Ward Groves. Barbara Groves Ward, yes. And we have Mr. Michael Hopkins, who are on our board. They were newly appointed to our board. And you also have Mr. Bill Hubbard, Bill Bozart. And you have Sherry Williams, who are on our board, and Ms. Barbara Hubbard, who used to be on our board. We'll continue to do the work for the citizens of Atlanta. Of course, we have our challenges, making sure that the police department handles our sustained complaints appropriately. That's one of the challenges that we've been facing. But the main thing that I'm here today to talk about is our mediation program. We started this mediation program, well actually we were authorized for it in March 2016. We started the program, implemented, kicked it off September 2017, and last year from that date we had 4 successfully mediated complaints. We have now 6 successfully mediated complaints. And just to talk briefly about mediations, the way it works is if a citizen files a complaint against an officer, the citizen and the officer will both have to agree to come in and talk with a third-party mediator to see if they can work out a resolution for the complaint. We view it as a win-win for everyone, especially whenever we can increase the dialogue between citizens and officers. Mind you, it's on a one-on-one basis, but that's how you start improving relationships, sharing perspectives, getting a better understanding of what's happening in the community, especially for individuals and the officers that can spread that along with their contacts. We have contracted with 2 of them are former retired judges. One is a former law enforcement officer, one is a college professor, and one is a with the Fulton County courts as a mediator. So we're coming along, we're encouraging any people, if they have any concerns, to contact the agency. It's not necessarily always about a complaint, sometimes it's just a question. And that's what we're here for, to answer those questions and to deal with complaints when individuals have them. We also have our Know Your Rights training that I mentioned earlier. We love going out before people, telling people about what we do, and also educating them on their rights. So we want people to just express those concerns and find out what the law enforcement officers can and can't do, and if you have a problem, let us know about it. I want to thank some of the MPUs that we appeared before over the past several months to actually talk to them about the mediation program. We've gone maybe before 10 or 12 different MPUs to talk to at the MPU meetings about the mediation program, so I appreciate that. Just want to go on record. And if there are any other groups, organizations, or MPUs that would like us to come in and talk about what we do, talk about the mediation program, please let me know. One other thing I want to mention before I forget, we have an art and essay contest for citizens of Atlanta and Metro Atlanta residents to get your opinions, thoughts, perspectives on if you were a law enforcement officer, how would you be? That's the theme of it. The art and essay contest ends March 30th, I believe it is. So if you know anyone who likes to write or likes doing art and they want to do a work on our theme, please have them do so. Our contact information is acrbgov.org. That's our website. Our phone number is 404-865-8622. And to answer one of your questions about the stipends, yes, our board members now receive $50 for the monthly meeting and for the training. You have to attend in order to get it. We thought that was a fair amount for the board members for the time that they put in and for whatever cost that's related to that. Our board members, they have to put in between 10, 12 hours a month with reading cases, doing outreach, coming to the board meetings, doing training. So these are things that we require of them, and so they're held accountable for that, but they can only get that money if they attend the meeting, if they attend the training. Those are the two things that they get it for. They don't get it for outreach, they don't get it for anything other than the board meeting, that monthly board meeting, and any board sanctioned training. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Mr. Tillmer?
How can I pass an opportunity?
Right.
Thank you for your presentation. It seems like that you guys have gone through some sort of, I want to say reorganization, but your charter was updated or something, or is in the process of being updated. Can you give us a brief on your new authorities, or what is proposed to be your authority?
In 2016, this should be classified as a major overhaul of the ordinance. One of the major things, three of the major pieces that we dealt with was one, expanding our jurisdiction over the types of complaints that we could take. Prior to the 2016 change, we were only able to take 7 different categories. Now we're able to take like 13 different categories from the ones that we already, I'll read them to you real quick. Use of language, false arrest, false imprisonment, harassment, use of excessive force, serious bodily injury, death. Those were the ones that we had before. Then we added in 2016 a range of discrimination issues, discriminatory references, abuse of authority, officer conduct, retaliation, failure to identify, anonymous complaints, allow individuals to be able to file anonymous complaints, and just violations of the SOP as a general catch-all. We wanted to make sure that we were in a position to deal with the issues and concerns that citizens had and not have to just send them away because, oh, I'm sorry, we can't take that type of complaint. That was one of the main changes. The other change was the mediation program that I just talked about. And then there was also a requirement added for the chiefs of police and corrections that when they disagree with a sustained complaint that we've sent over to them for discipline, that they would provide not just their disagreement, but also the rationale and the reason for that disagreement. Because we need to be able to narrow and identify what the issues are that's preventing them from discipline, or in the board's mind, being able to handle the cases appropriately. So that's one of the things that we really started looking at. Now we have a good data set that we can start looking at to identifying the issues that we need to have a conversation with the police department about. Those are the main 3 things. There were like 13 different changes. Some of them had to do with the board, some of them had to do with board member removal, term limits on the board, outreach requirements. So it's like 13, but that's the main stuff.
Wasn't the stipend included?
That was included, yes. Yes, that was one of them.
Any more questions, Mr. Reed? Well, thank you so much for coming and giving us that information. We really appreciate it. And Mr. Reed he's left some, I believe, the mediation program brochure,
yes,
as well as their overall brochure about their services. Thank you so much. Mr. Howard, if you could wait to public comment.
This is another
Thank
public
you.
comment. This is a quick question. Quick question. I'd just like to know if the board would consider assessing the temperament of the police force in as much as
It's on, but
in as much as there is a 300 count deficit, and others, those that are there are having to bear the, the burdens of those.
unless any members want to say anything other than Mr. Reed. Ms. Bush, do you have a report?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's right, I have it right here. Thank you, someone fill this up here. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, In the interest of time, you have the report before you, and the first thing I want to do is answer Mr. Toomer's request about rescheduling appearances at the code enforcement court. I took it upon myself to visit the court, and with the flow of information, if you've never attended that court, the people who are cited are, the flow is that they go to the social workers, case workers that have the cases before them in the computer, and they report as to what their citation is. And the case workers decide if the case could be dismissed or whether or not there was any real evidence there, and they direct them to, have a seat in one section of the court. Some people bring their lawyers because there are serious violations. So when they appear, the judge may give them extra time to correct the violation for various and sundry reasons. So without me having any law background, I just observed what was happening in the process. I will say that there needs to be more education, and that's what one of the judges mentioned during the Code Enforcement Commission meeting. Atlanta is growing, our neighborhoods are changing, and the code enforcement addresses a lot of different things. You have code enforcement issues in zoning, public works, and watershed. As you can see in the report, I tried to put in bold type the issues that were covered in the code enforcement meeting. Councilmember Shepherd asked for the top 10 violators of watershed bills, and the condominiums on Peachtree Street are not the only ones that owe $1 million. There are 2 more, and the lowest one on that list owed $342,000 in deficit water bill payments. It's a lot of information, so I've just kind of reduced it to the main issues that were on the agenda. And those, mainly those violators are multifamily landlords. And there's a question as well, the water leak is on the city side. No, the water leak is on the property. And there are extenuating circumstances where the city can't go on the property. So they have to determine how they're going to find out about that water leak. It may be in the street, if it's been there a long time, and I'll just use one example. There's a violator on Macon Drive. So it's causing the street to deteriorate, because of the asphalt and all that. So as you can see, there were a lot of interim cases, and this was reported by Major Van Hobbs, who is over code enforcement. There was an update from Watershed, which I just mentioned. Landlords of multifamily housing, responsible parties for repairing the water leak. They have to determine if the city or the owner. There was an update by Public Works by Commissioner Johnson, who made a PowerPoint presentation. The city has a problem with people dumping bulk items on property for collection when it's not the collection week. And this is a big problem because the landlords, and when they evict someone, they just put the property, just dump it out on the property. And So that situation was addressed as to how to eliminate the dumping all over the city when people are evicted, because, you know, they just put it out on the property, it stays there, and there were conversations about, well, you know, they need to get a dumpster or whatever. Well, the landlord doesn't want to spend the money. So there are some issues about bulk debris on the curb, and let's see, the last one, old business. Of course, there's follow-up items from last month, and as I mentioned, the Public Defender's Office representative spoke about focusing on education. I know in my NPU, in my neighborhood, there are people who have moved from other cities, other states, and they are not acquainted with how the city sweeps streets and collect leaves and all of that. So, you know, through the process of going through your community association, going to those meetings, then going to the NPUs, you're getting bits and pieces of information. And because I'm a home economist, that's in our bailiwick. We try to educate people about, you know, spring will be here in a minute. You should trim your shrubbery and tree limbs and everything between October and February, because, you know, things are beginning to grow. Ivy is a culprit. Wisteria is a culprit if you don't control it. So those are some of the things that we try to do in Ashview Heights, is to educate our neighbors about trash pickup is on Thursday. You can't put it out before 7 p.m. Wednesday night, and you must collect it back. So if we have violators, we report them. And as you can see, a lot of people do not know, code enforcement rides along with the sanitation workers. So if you have a violator in that neighborhood, they not only look at the violator that was reported, but they look at other properties that may not have been reported, but are violators. And if you agree, sometimes certain violations, if you agree to that, there's a $250 charge. So I witnessed people, landlords who were saying, it was the renters, I'll just pay it, I don't want to deal with it, I'm too old to deal with it, you know, all sorts of excuses. So we have to become more educated about code enforcement issues.
Very good report. Thank you, Ms. Bush. I have two comments. The first is, do you know, like when families are evicted and their property stays out, you know, on the lawn or wherever, sometimes the city right away, does the city come at some point to clean it up?
Oh, that's a good question. And evictions are handled by Fulton County. Yeah, the sheriff's office. Sheriff's office. So I can get that for you, but you know, evictions, sometimes that property that's on the lawn, that kind of prompts a new business, because there are people who ride around in the community and they pick up the leftovers and they sell it at the flea market. So, you know.
So we could find out, if you don't mind finding out, I guess it would be Fulton County.
Fulton County Sheriff's Office.
Sheriff's Office. Okay, that would, I was just always wondering, because at some point, I thought I saw city, public works at some point after a certain period, trying to clean up the mess.
They may have, because, you know, people call, neighbors call and say, you know, this is, you all need to come get it. And they may not know the right flow or agency to call, so they just, you know, they live in the city, call the city.
And then my second, I'm sorry, and then I have one more thing. This is actually for everyone. This is an education announcement that I didn't know, and I think it'll be helpful for everyone.
So about 3, maybe 2.5, 3 weeks ago, I was pulling out my driveway and the trash, sanitation were coming to pick up my trash. And next thing I know, they were taking my trash can, the Herbie Kirby. They just took it. And so I kind of rolled down the window and asked them, why'd you take my trash can? And they said, oh, we're going to give you a new one. So I said, well, how are you going to know, what address? They said, oh, we know your address. They never returned it. So I called the city of the 311 probably about 3 or 4 days ago, like, okay, explain the whole situation to them. Did you all know that the city employee told me that the process is that when they did that, I should have called and requested a new one? How was I supposed to know that? Because I didn't think anything was wrong with my Herbie Kirby. It seemed it didn't have any holes. It was okay, but they took it. So now I have to wait. It's going to be almost a month. It'll be 7 days. So I think they said sometime the 21st of March. But I do think the citizens need to know, because I had no idea that, okay, if you're going to take my trash can for whatever reason, oh, I got to get on the phone and I've got to call 311 to request a new one. I will say I wasn't happy about what she said. And I tried to be as professional as possible, because it was almost like citizens should know. And what I explained to her is that I don't know everything, but I'm a pretty informed citizen, and I didn't know that. And I'm sure that my neighbors don't know that. So just to be advised, if they take your Herbie Kirby and it doesn't come out of the truck, that's what you would need to do. Okay?
Madam President?
Yes.
I had a similar situation. Mine got stuck in the truck, and they didn't say a word. They just went down the street. One second.
I've been in the queue.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Carr, please,
I've been in the queue.
please, Ms. Phillips has been recognized.
What happens is, I even got to call 311, like you said, you have to call yourself. But I even had the opportunity to speak to the commissioner of DPW about it. And I told him, if my nephew had not been out there, we never would have known what happened to the trash can. He saw them and just put it on the truck. It didn't come off, and they went right on down the street. He went running down behind them. I asked the commissioner at that time, is it not possible for your trash, the drivers, to have just a little slip of paper on there, and if something happens to the receptacle, for them to just stick that piece of paper in your mailbox saying your Herbie Kirby was defective, please call 311. So I think that it might benefit us all if we just ask our residents to kind of put in that request again to the DPW commissioner, because that's a simple fix. You shouldn't have to run around and try to find your trash can.
That's right. Mr. Carr?
Thank you. By the way, instead of calling 311, I would recommend you call 911, because that was theft of your Herbie Kirby. As far as education is concerned, communication, the city has a monthly or a bi-monthly mechanism to reach 99% of property owners in this city. That's called a water bill. Somebody, perhaps, will put together a helpful list, a brochure of necessary pieces of information that everybody needs to know about, and that they can tack this to their refrigerator or any other personal communications device that they might have.
That's a good idea. We actually talked about that, putting a notice in the water bills, talking to the Commissioner of Watershed, who has been invited, by the way, to attend one of our meetings to talk about putting something in the water bills as it pertains to not just APAP, but NPU as well. Mr. Snyder?
Mr. Snyder, please excuse me 1 second before you speak. The code ethics person just came in and said that if there's anybody else here that needs to file or have any other questions, you need to come out now. They'll be leaving shortly.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Mr. Snyder?
Okay, Jim Snyder, MUE again. I'm not an attorney, but I'm a real estate broker. And when someone gets a dispossessory, which is technically what an eviction is, the dispossessory is to dispossess them of that property that they are occupying. So when the personal property is removed, it is removed off of the property and must be placed on the public right-of-way. Therefore, trash in the public right-of-way becomes Department of Public Works, Sanitation to remove it. And of course, the people come by and steal the stuff, and I tell my clients never to touch any of the material belonging to a former tenant, because obviously they're suspect in prosecution, the rest of it, but the stuff is supposed to go on the public right-of-way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Snyder. Mr. Hopkins.
Good afternoon. But anyway, I wanted to respond to your situation. I had that same situation, and what happened was that the sanitation department, they had damaged my Kirby. And at that point, I got in touch with the installation chief in my area at Public Works, and they brought it out the next day. So if you were to get in touch with the installation chief, they would get with the rock supervisor, they could bring you one out immediately, because they did mine the next day.
Installation chief. Thank you. Good to know.
Any other questions?
That's it. Thank you, Ms. Bush. Could you send your report to apabatlanta@gmail.com, please?
No, I didn't, but I
No, I
can.
was saying, can you do that?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Okay, Ms. Hubbard, do you have a report? Okay. At this time, we're going to move into our committee reports. I will say, okay, we have 10 minutes before 12. Mr. Martin, going to reduce your FYI report to 2 minutes. You need 1 minute? Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Let's see, CHR Committee and Zoning Committee both met on 3/12. Meet again on 4/9. First meeting is CHR, 7 p.m. Second meeting is Zoning, 7:45, both at Chin Chin Restaurant, 1750 Howland Road. At this month's meeting, I was the only attendee at both meetings. Drafted 2 resolutions, one for each committee. Copies are on the front table there. Zoning Committee resolution pertains to the Special Administrative Permit in Quality of Life zoning districts. That's MR and MRC. The problem with the process as it currently exists is that the law requires notification of applications be sent to the chair of the affected NPU, and that is not being done. So the resolution calls for that to be done, and then also to review the process itself, because as you may recall, we passed a resolution last month requesting in the Beltline overlay, where notifications are sent out, that notifications of both applications and decisions are sent out. Then with regard to the CHR Committee, the resolution pertains to the extension of the life of tax allocation districts. The issue here is that when more than 10% of the city's tax digest is in tax allocation districts, the city cannot create a new tax allocation district. But apparently the city can extend the life of an existing tax allocation district, and this is a problem as it creates a burden on taxpayers, and therefore we are calling on City Council not to do that. So that is everything I have. If there are any questions.
Mr. Snyder?
Jim Snyder, this question and a statement. The quick fixes that are floating around, of which there are 14, I have real problems with, because they're trying to get an NPU to deal with 14 items in a regular NPU meeting, and if you talk about 14 and even 10 minutes per, there's an NPU meeting right there. It is wholly inappropriate. I know a lot of NPUs have already voted on it. They take it as gospel that the city is doing it right, and it's trust us. And I strongly object to that, and I will be speaking at the ZRB hearing coming up, because I think this is an abomination. They say they're listening to us, and particularly the one that talks about getting rid of unused zoning districts. I've been suggesting for over 2 years that there's one zoning district in the city of Atlanta that has never had a single property zoned to it, and that is Planned Development Business Park. And that they did it for a developer and he never showed up. And they have not put it in. So my point is, their legislation and debate the pros and cons of it. Plus the fact they don't have anybody there who's not being, in effect, the cheerleaders for it. So the whole process, to me, is a methodology for the city to eliminate citizen participation in, obviously, the rezonings and variances by making it more administrative and not public hearing. I will also cite Z1817, which is the definition of shelters, or change the definition, and allows for an exemption for a shelter that's been in operation since 2000 to increase up to 22,000 square feet, what they already have, without having a special use permit. I mean, that's a pile of cow manure, folks, and yet it's coming in and it's saying, you know, this is what the city's going to change the ordinance, as if you should accept it. Folks, sit back and look at what they're doing to us, because they're taking away from citizen participation. Not saying that we're right or wrong, but we should have the right to listen and make our own decisions. And when they come to the 25 MPUs, again, we need to have some citywide discussion, because a lot of MPUs don't see all this. They don't always know what every nuance of these, but collectively we can bring people in. Debbie's sitting here ready to talk, and there are a number of people around who've had a lot of experience.
Point of order. No. Being that we're so close to the time, I would suggest that we call a vote on this, and I would recommend that we vote it down. There are many loopholes in that, as Jim was stating, and I know there's probably, in this room, you can probably come up with many more. Just the fact of the name of it called quick fixes is a problem.
I'm sorry, this is not a business.
Are we not talking about these resolutions?
Jim was talking about quick fixes and
Yeah,
something
Jim just
that, something that somehow was a question.
It's a current topic, is the point, and both of them are current topics because they're in front of us.
So are you making a recommendation to the committee to consider
Now,
it
I would
for a
recommend that
resolution?
both the quick fixes and the change the definition of shelter, both of them be recommended for denial.
Well, we did discuss, I did discuss this with myself in my committee meeting.
I'm sure it was highly.
And I unanimously decided that I should probably point out that both last month and for information this month, we've had resolutions pointing to flaws in the SAP process, and that the quick fixes in at least 3 items seek to expand the SAP process, which is to take a process that is now dysfunctional and apply it to more things, rather than fixing the process that is now dysfunctional, which seems problematic to me.
So I just want to make sure is there an action item?
I made a motion with both the quick fix zoning ordinance. I don't have the Z number, but the shelter is Z1817.
Yeah, these are business items on MPU agendas.
Yeah, they're on individual MPU agendas. However, are you asking
Well, the
for
recommendation
APAB?
is for the MPUs to vote them down.
Okay, all right, thank you. Ms. Kosinski?
Yes, I want to go back to the resolution on the SAPs. First of all, thank you so much for bringing this one forward. NPUF does a considerable number of SAPs. I'd like a couple changes to the resolution. One is this is limited to the quality of life zoning districts and MRC and MR zoning districts, and should be expanded, in my mind, to the Beltline overlay districts and also the neighborhood commercial districts, which some have SAP requirements. It's the same deal, though. We almost never find out about them until they're absolutely late. And then just for clarity purposes, the NPs receiving the SAPs is more than just information only. We have 21 days to respond to those SAPs and to provide comments. And once we know they're there, then we can ride the city's proverbial butt to make sure that those concerns are reviewed and that we're part of that process. So this is just a highly important change.
I'll look over the NC stuff. We had a resolution about the Beltline stuff last month. And from my own experience, and I think Ola agreed with me on this one, that the issue in the Beltline is not a failure to notify of applications. I do get notifications of applications in the Beltline overlay, but rather a failure to notify of decisions, which is not required by law.
Right. Yeah, I don't get all of the Beltline overlay, and also because NPUF rides along the Beltline, we're not getting all of the documentation for applications that are within 300 feet of the NPU, which is required under other kinds of conditions.
Okay.
So we need that. Thank you.
Well, it is now 12 o'clock, and so can I get a motion to extend the meeting for 30 minutes?
Motion to extend the meeting for 30 minutes?
Second.
Okay, then the meeting has been extended.
All those in favor?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Any opposed?
Is that 3?
4. 5.
6.
6. It's growing. 7. So 7 for against.
Keep fishing.
Okay, and how many for?
Count in.
Okay.
Fine.
All for extending the meeting, please raise your hand. Oops, sorry.
7.
No, I do not.
7.
7, okay. Those who do not want to extend the meeting? Okay, 11. Any abstentions? Okay, that motion does not carry. And so, thank you all so much for being here at the meeting.
Motion to
And the motion has been adjourned. Can I get a second? Meeting adjourned. Thank you all so much, and have a good Saturday, the rest of your weekend.